Hi, I'm Femi OK and you're in the stream. Today, a real conversation with a fake news correspondent. Stand by, this could be a challenge. Perhaps best known as The Daily Show's senior Muslim correspondent on Comedy Central in the United States, Aasif Mandvi joins us now from New York. Aasif, it's great to have you here on the stream. How are you?
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Excellent. So now, before we go much further, for those of you who aren't familiar with Aasif's work on The Daily Show, it's a humorous take on the news. I want you to check out this clip from January the 7th.
What is going on here?
Well, John, the way I see it, the cows, because we're talking about cows, right? Yeah. Are by nature peaceful animals. And then you get these crazy ones with this violent, outdated ideology.
Yeah, how do you explain that?
Why is it my job to explain that? Okay, why do I have to answer for every cow out there, okay? I don't like Nazi cows any more than you do, John.
So apart from being an actor, Aasif is also a writer, and his new book is called No Landsman. It's a series of essays about his life as an immigrant, so lots to talk about with him. Also, Malika Bilal is wrangling the online community. What do you have in store for us in this show?
Well, lots of tweets already coming in, and of course, for those of you at home, we want you to keep sending us your questions and comments using hashtag AJStream. But we'll also be joined by members of our community, all big fans, and they're all standing by with questions for Aasif, and we're looking forward to those.
So on the back of Aasif's book, there's a little picture here. It's very tiny, you can't see it, but I've blown it up on my computer. Have a look back here. This is him. He's looking super cool. He is rocking an afro and sunglasses, leaning against a fence. Where is that, Aasif?
I have no idea. I think that is actually on a road trip that we took. It's somewhere in the Carolinas,
right.
I think. It was a road trip that we took up the East Coast when I was in high school, and as you can see, I was very much into my Michael Jackson. It was the 80s, so you know I was into the MJ glasses and the Police T-shirt and the afro, standing in front of like some kind of sort of rundown farmhouse.
Yeah,
I don't know where I am.
I mean, as a little boy, what were you like?
What was I like?
Yeah, what were you like? What kind of little boy were you?
I think I was, well, once I discovered acting and once I discovered theater, I sort of became, I guess, a little theater nerd, you know?
Yeah.
I sort of was doing school plays all the time and doing all that stuff. So I think that defined me after the age of like 10, you know?
Right. Were you funny, intense? What kind of theatre nerd were you?
I think I was always funny. I think I always sort of, you know, gravitated towards, it was a way to fit in, you know, people always say, like, I became funny because I didn't have any friends, you know, and so it was a way to sort of also, like, after I moved to America and went to high school and stuff, I think being funny became the way to sort of get friends and find you know, find a place in this new world.
Well, Aasif, you have 4 newfound friends who are standing by to ask you questions. So I'm going to go to one of them, Yasmin.
Great.
Yasmin, go ahead.
Hey, Aasif. I was just wondering. I know that the process of immigrating is, you know, it's pretty substantial, and I was wondering how long it was after you moved to the U.S. that you started to feel American.
Oh, that's an interesting question. You know, I grew up in England. Like in my book, I talk about I grew up in the UK and then moved to America, and my national identity has always been something that I feel has been. I think I've always been kind of felt like an outsider and an insider at the same time. So I feel American, but I also don't feel American, if that makes sense. You know, I think I have, because I grew up in another country, because I was always an immigrant and a minority and stuff, I think I always had a perspective of the outsider looking in to the majority culture. So I feel sort of, I guess, multicultural. You know, where that's kind of sort of, you know, cliche, but it is true.
See, Aasif, you grew up in the north of England, in Bradford, in Yorkshire. Do you, if you dug deep, could you still do a Yorkshire accent?
Oh, right, I can, yeah.
Ooh,
Look, just like that, love.
Can you say,
oh, yes,
mashy peas and pies and chips, please?
mashy peas and pies and chips, love. You want, do you want salt and vinegar on that?
Yes, please. And a chip butty as well, thank you. We're speaking English, by the way, if
too,
anyone's
love.
just tuned in. This is Al Jazeera English, and we are speaking English from the north of England. Okay. You went to boarding school.
Unless you're Pakistani in England, and then it's like, get out of my shop. You know, then it's a different thing.
You went to boarding school when you were in the UK. Why did your mum and dad send you to boarding school of all places?
Because I couldn't get into any good schools. I couldn't pass the entrance exam to any good schools because I was a dummy. And so my parents, of course, being Indian immigrants, were like, we must send you to the best school in, you know, because all of their friends' kids who were super smart were all going to the best school. So it becomes, you know, keeping up with the Patels, right? So it's, the only way I could get to go to private school and not like, you know, what in England they call like just state school, like public school, was by being a boarder.
Right, okay.
By paying for it. So the school said he's not smart enough to come as a regular student because he failed the entrance exam, but if you pay twice the tuition, and we have a bed for him and he can stay here. So my parents opted to do that just so that I could get the education, you know, that they felt like
the world is now benefiting from. Yes.
Right. Yes.
You know,
and it was also the education that all of their friends' kids were getting. So I think that's why they were so, you know, adamant about it.
You know, Aasif, some of your more memorable parts for me in your book is when you talk about some of your experiences in school. And so there's a question on Twitter that kind of references that. Scott Beller asks, I'd like to ask if your bullied past might make it easier for you to fearlessly expose and poke fun at some of the people that you interviewed today.
You know, I've never really unpacked that in that way, but I can see how that could be true. I've always, you know, even before The Daily Show, one of my first jobs out of school was working at the Disney MGM studios in Orlando, where I was doing street improvisational comedy, and part of the job was to just sort of walk up to people, approach them, and kind of, you know, basically just play with them and play games with them that they didn't know that they were playing.
Yeah. Like what? I'm trying to imagine what that would be like. What would you play with them they didn't know?
We would just assume a character.
Yeah.
And like for the character that I played at the MGM studios was a character named Manju, who was based on a sort of New York cabbie type character, and I would just walk up to people, and it was a basic improv game where you would just walk up and you would just assume a situation with someone and then wait for them to catch up, you know?
Right.
And so the thing is, so that's just basic improv stuff, and I think that sort of laid the groundwork for me to be able to go out and do these interviews with The Daily Show. It was just that basic improv background of like, you know, being in a situation with somebody, because on The Daily Show interviews, we are playing a game that sometimes the other person doesn't know that we're playing.
Yeah.
And it's the same kind of, it's based in the same sort of improv techniques that that I learned when I was younger, which I may have had a proclivity towards that because I was bullied and kind of wanted to get back at the kids that bullied me. I don't know about that.
Yeah.
Amr, I know you have a question.
Hi, Aasif. Long time.
Hey, how are you?
I wanted to know. Good. I wanted to know what it was like coming up through the industry as a young brown actor / sort of comic, and whether you're at a place in your career where you maybe can pick and choose your roles more easily, or you know it's much easier for you to navigate now, or whether it's still as hard.
I mean, you know, coming up in the business, it was, you know, I was sort of, I got to New York in like the early '90s, and there weren't a lot of roles for South Asian actors, Middle Eastern actors. You know, there's a lot more now available. But when I was starting out, it was basically the odd cab driver here, the odd deli owner now and then. But it wasn't as what it is today. And even now, it is still, you still deal with the ethnicity. You're still brown first. Although I think that's getting better, and I think that is changing as we see more and more people creating and doing roles on television now that are more integrated,
Tell us about a role that you did because you had to work that you hated, like really hated, and was thinking, maybe I should do something else, maybe not acting.
Well, there's a story in the book that I talk about where one of the first auditions that I went to in New York, when I got to New York, was for a snake charmer in like an industrial commercial or something. And when I went in, they actually asked me if I knew how to snake charm. And I thought to myself, oh my God, like I was so desperate for the job because I knew I needed to pay the rent that I actually remember saying, well, I don't know how to snake charm, but I am Indian, so it could be in my DNA, and I think I could probably figure it out, So there were a lot of auditions like that, when I first started out.
Francis?
I'm processing that story. I think that connects to a lot of the kind of the crazy stuff you hear. Okay, let's just jump in. In terms of like people are saying, okay, satire and art, but there's a limit. Do you think there's a limit, especially like in regards to the Charlie Hebdo stuff? Is there a limit to how far you go with satire, or do you worry about if the audience isn't going to get it, or the chance that they might misinterpret it and like take it the wrong way, like with acts of violence and racism?
I mean, look, I think. Are you asking me? Yeah. I think that with satire, traditionally satire pokes fun at the people and the institutions that we hold dear and that we hold, who have the power, i.e., religion, government, big corporations, things like that, right? So those are where we reserve satire for, because the exposure of those institutions in a satirical sense allows us to have that conversation about them, and and it's sort of the jester. There's always been the jester in the back of the court making fun of the king, right? So that is the purpose of satire in our society. I think it can often perhaps move towards racism when you're punching down and the people that you're making fun of are the poor or the underprivileged or people who don't have a voice or don't have power. I think that's when it perhaps becomes distasteful, and an audience will tell you that. So, I think the purpose of satire
how does the audience tell you that? How did you experience that and know, okay, then that's tough for them to take in? Give us an example.
Well, I think in different ways. I mean, if you're doing a live stage performance, the audience won't laugh, or they will feel uncomfortable, or And but I think you also have to gauge it within yourself. I think as a comedian or a satirist or an actor or anything, or as a cartoonist, a writer, whatever, you gauge within yourself what you think, what you want to say and how you want to say it and what the point you're trying to make is. But the audience will, your readership, your audience, your viewership will tell you, based on their response, where you are culturally, where you're landing, There was a joke that I did on The Daily Show, on my first ever piece that I did on The Daily Show, which was about 9/11. And it was a joke that, you could tell immediately after we did it that as much as people laughed, they were also uncomfortable, but in a way that was in a good way, because the joke wasn't about the victims or anything like that. It was about the governmental response to it, right? So I think people got what we were trying to say and what we were satirizing, you know, in terms of the hypocrisy of the war and all that stuff that happened afterwards.
Going back to the book, there's a trailer that's 5 minutes long that I do recommend that everybody check it out because it's a comedy sketch all by itself. There's a little bit here with you and Jack Black. And I'm not going to ask you to tell me about it. I'm just going to play it. All right, so sit tight, everybody. Have a look at this.
All right.
And I wanted to ask you if you would be in my book trailer.
What's it about?
It's a collection of humorous essays about my life growing up in the US, growing up in the UK, you know, being an immigrant, being Indian, being Muslim, that kind of thing.
What?
What?
You're a Muslim?
Yeah, well, I was raised Muslim, yeah.
Are you fasting? I had no idea. I'm so sorry.
No, thank you so much. That's very kind of you, but no, I don't.
And I offered you a brewski. I'm such an idiot.
It's fine.
You need to pray?
Pray? Right now? No,
Yeah. Because I know you guys pray a lot.
I don't need to pray.
It's cool, man. You don't have to hide the fact that you're Muslim on this set.
Oh, I'm not.
Okay? Because we respect all religions, all creeds, all ethnicities.
Right,
if you need to pray, you pray, dude.
I'm going to stop it now. I wish I could play the whole 5 minutes for you. Does that need any unpacking? I don't think it does. Our online community also want to talk to you about this idea about being Muslim and you of all people being the Muslim correspondent on The Daily Show, Malika.
And just personally, I resonated with that first clip and seeing Jack Black ask those questions.
Yeah.
I love that part. But I want to share this Facebook comment that we got from someone online, Aasif. Schmidt writes in, do you have any fears when you do religiously charged jokes? And I'm going to narrow that in a little bit. Do you have fears from actual other Muslim people? Do they ever come up to you afterwards and say, I really hated what you just did?
No, that's, you know, I've never really had that. I get much more between, like, you know, things that I've tweeted about gun control versus sort of Muslim stuff. I feel like I get much more angry responses from people who are angry about what I've said about gun control, you know, in America. So, like, I rarely have gotten stuff from Muslims coming up to me. I mean, that could be just because Muslims are so excited that there's a Muslim on television talking about, you know, anything doing with, like, the Middle East or whatever, that they just want us to keep it up, you know. But it's rare that I get Muslims coming up to me and saying, you know, I didn't like what that said. I mean, that's often people will say, like, you guys could have gone further. You know, I think you pulled your punches or whatever, but not that you went too far.
It's from your book. I'm not a very good example of a Muslim, and I can't speak for all of Islam. Not a very good example of a Muslim. There's some dating stories which are disastrous in some of the essays that you shared with us. There's one in particular when you're on the train to Bradford, a young, stunningly beautiful lady who is wearing hijab. You are trying to flirt with her in a way that would probably be quite shocking for people who were maybe a little bit more observant than you are. Why did you share that story? Because it kind of puts you in a very revealing light.
Yeah, I wanted to share that story because it really, for me, represented sort of the internal contradiction of identity. You know, that story for me is really about the East and the West coming together, and it is about this idea of this man, i.e. me, who is Eastern and Western at the same time, and conflicted with his own identity. Dealing with a woman who is embracing certain aspects of my identity that I have all kinds of complicated feelings about, and including having complicated feelings about her. So the story really is about that, the collision between cultures in that moment on that train, and the culture of one person who has chosen to be more traditional and wear hijab and all that stuff, and another person who has chosen another Muslim who has chosen a different path and is more secular, and how these two worlds actually view each other on that train. So that's what I was trying to talk about in that story.
Have you resolved that conflict?
And it does reveal aspects of me that I think are that are darker, and I think, but I think it was necessary because I was also wanting to talk about this idea of the arrogance of my Western identity.
Yeah. I mean, you basically thought she was hot, and you were trying to get her to fancy you. And this was never going to work out. It was never going to work out, right? Ever.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But 10 out of 10 for trying. And she also had a little boy. Add that to the mix there. So that was a challenge.
The little boy did kind of like Aasif, so that worked there. But I want to get in our last guest who has a question for you. Ernie, go ahead.
Hi, Aasif. Hopefully, looking forward to asking you a question. I was wondering, just going back to what you're talking about with satire, when you prepare something for The Daily Show, either a segment or something like that, do you ever do a sort of cost-benefit analysis to a certain issue you're going to tackle or anything like that? Like, what's the risk of who you're going to hurt and how much is it going to benefit with what you're trying to say?
I don't know if we ever do a cost-benefit analysis. I don't think we're that smart. I think that we usually just, we have a story, we have a take on it, and we try to find whatever is humorous. You know, our currency on The Daily Show is usually what is hypocritical and ironic and absurd. And so that's really where we attack an issue and try to find, the best ones are when you catch people in their own hypocrisy. And so, again, in terms of satirical sort of raw material, that's people can relate to that. People can relate to people in power, or they enjoy us, calling out people in power for their hypocrisy.
Aasif, what's next? What do you want to do next? There are no barriers.
Well,
you could do whatever you want.
Well, what is next? What is actually next is that I'm going to be on an HBO series that comes out in June of this year.
Nice.
Called The Brink.
Yes.
Which is a geopolitical, comedic, satirical show starring Jack Black and Tim Robbins and Pablo Schreiber, Carla Gugino, John Larroquette. It's got a great cast. And it's going to be out, and it's about a geopolitical crisis seen in real time through three departments of U.S. government. So it's seen through the State Department, the Foreign Service, and the military.
Wow.
And the first season takes place primarily in Pakistan, and it's great. It's like if Homeland was a comedy,
Okay.
So
looking forward to that.
Yeah, so I'm excited about that, and then I just want to continue. A few years ago, I made a movie called Today's Special, which was inspired by my one-man show, Sakina's Restaurant, and I'd like to write more films in the future. So I've got some of that stuff in the pipeline as well.
All right, so I'm going to end where we began with this picture of you as a teen, looking like Michael Jackson. I understand that at one point you could sound like Michael Jackson as well. Can you give us a little bit of Billie Jean? Can you do it? Did you warm your voice up?
Let me see.
20 seconds, sing us out.
Wow. All right, so
15 now. Aasif Jackson.
She was more like, I can't.
It's going well.
She was more like a beauty queen from the scene. I said, don't mind, but what do you mean? I am the one.
Aasif Mandvi, we're taking you into the post show.
Now.
Yes, it's very nice. Thank you very much, Aasif Mandvi. There is so much more of him to come up on the post show at stream.aljazeera.com. Also, coming up on tomorrow's show, Malika Bilal will be here. I will be at the UN, and you'll be talking about what?
Haiti. We'll be tackling that topic 5 years after a catastrophic earthquake. Has Haiti been rebuilt, or is it still struggling to emerge from the rubble? We'll discuss that on Thursday. Until then, we'll see you online.
Hello again, we're chatting with Aasif Mandvi and we're going to get right back to that conversation. Aasif, thank you so much for doing a little bit of Billie Jean. That was so mean of me just to spring that onto you.
I totally have a cold right now.
I totally have one as well. There you go, just proving that I too have one. But you did a great job. Okay, reading this, disclaimer. Although the stories in this book are based on true events, the specific circumstances are often a blend of fact and imagination. You made your book up, right?
I made the whole thing up, yeah. Well,
it's very disturbing when you're reading, because I don't know, like, is he really on the ledge? Did he really get thrown on the ledge at school?
Right.
Is he making it sound better or worse so that it carries me along? I was like, why did you do that?
Well, here's the thing. What I did was, first of all, I changed the names of people and stuff to protect the innocent, right?
Yeah.
And then what I did was, in writing these stories, I realized that, you know, often there was something larger that I wanted to say or attempting to say with each story. And so sometimes, every story is inspired by true events and things that really did happen. However, what I did do was service the story rather than the facts. You know what I mean? It's that old adage of like...
I love the fact that a fake correspondent was like, I service the story rather than the facts.
Right.
Because it's just a better read.
It's that old adage. Yeah, well, you know, it's the old adage of the truth is what was it, the story facts obscure the truth told by the story. So you know what I mean? Like, so it's kind of that thing of like there's a story that I'm trying to tell, and that was what I was trying to service in each instance of that. And so sometimes, you know, as a storyteller, you have to take some artistic license with things. Are we getting the you that you would like to be, or the you that you are? Are you hotter and sexier, have more dates in this book than in real life? Or are you hiding something? No, I actually wrote a much. It's funny because I had this conversation with my editor where I was like, I feel like a complete loser in every one of these stories.
Yeah.
Maybe I should have a story where I like get the girl and I'm like, I win the prize. And she was like, yeah, those stories aren't interesting. It's much more interesting to have a story, and it's funnier to tell stories about your misfires rather than your fires. So you know, I sort of focused. You know, the great thing about this is, and I'm always reluctant when people call it a memoir, because it's not. It's more just vignettes of stories of my life. And so, but I focused on moments where I could mine as much comedy out of it, and also, you know, use it, you know, my life as the sort of template, but the parts of my life where I didn't do so well, you know.
So, Aasif, speaking of some of the funny stories, well, definitely interesting, definitely funny. So speaking of some of those funny stories and talking about the essence behind the story, Zaid Jilani on Twitter says, you read an excerpt of your book at an event I was at about your dad buying shoes, girl shoes for you because they were on sale. And so he goes on to say, you write your parents raised you to be frugal. Even though you're well off now, he asked, do you still practice that frugality?
I don't think that I am probably as frugal as I should be. It's weird. I have like a sort of like a sense of non-frugality, but then the Indian guilt that I should be more frugal. You know, I always have my dad's ear, you know, my voice in my ear going like, you can buy 10 of those at JCPenney's.
So when you got your first big check, what did you spend it on?
What did I get my? I probably went on vacation or something. Like, you know what I mean? Like I think that so many years as a young actor, like you don't have money to go on vacation or take any kind of you know, trip anywhere. So I probably you know, went to the Caribbean or something.
When you do your dad's voice, Aasif, is it spookily accurate? Does he mind that you do him a lot? When you talk about your parents, you go into your dad automatically.
Yeah. Well, I've used my parents as a sort of raw material for my comedy and stories throughout my entire life. So I think they're kind of used to it now. They're reluctant participants, but I think they are now clearly, you know, they've seen success for me and all that stuff. So I think they're proud of me in that way. But it is always sort of slightly, I think, you know, my dad does roll his eyes a little bit sometimes.
Right.
He's like, there you go again, using me to find your comedy, and you know, he's like, all the money you've made is by doing, you know, telling stories about me, you know.
Francis, looks like you have another question. Go ahead.
Also, we originally met at a reading that you did with a big multi-generational crowd, and I was wondering, how have the aunties and uncles been reacting to your book? Is their reaction very different from, say, the 1.5 and second generation that we are?
Wait, how is the who? I'm sorry?
How are the aunties and uncles reacting to your book?
Oh, the aunties and uncles reacting. Oh, I mean, they really like it. I mean, I think that so far, you know, I've gotten great positive feedback from, you know, quote unquote, my own people, as it were, you know. And they can be the harshest critics. So I feel like the book shows even the depiction of my parents, although sometimes comical, is done with affection and shows their, you know, I always try to sort of show more than one side of them. So I think people have enjoyed it overall.
Do you know, there's something I picked up from the way you wrote the essays, from the way the essays were stacked, that you were coming to terms with the idea that people were looking at you to represent Southeast Asia, to represent Muslims, and you just wanted to be just assimilated. You wanted to be American, or you wanted to be British. You didn't want to be the thing that people looked up to. Am I reading too much into that, or is that maybe the backstory to all of these stories?
Well, I mean, I never started off, you know, I wanting to represent anything other than, you know, myself and my own sort of aspirations to be an actor and to perform and write and stuff like that. You know, once I got on The Daily Show, there was a sort of a quote-unquote cultural responsibility that sort of happened, where suddenly people were looking to me like, oh, you're the Muslim guy, or you're the brown guy on The Daily Show.
Yeah.
And because it was such an underrepresented voice in the culture, it's sort of, you start to feel that. But even now, I try to not think about that at all, because it's the death of, you know, like when I was writing the book, I couldn't really worry about how people were going to think about me or my culture or whatever, you know, because I had to write what was true for me and what was funny and interesting and honest, you know.
Sure.
And Amr Rahman, excuse me, I feel like that you can relate to that in some way, of speaking to an audience about what's true to you and what's honest about you. Amr?
Yeah, I mean, especially if you go into comedy or political comedy, I think you really have to be prepared to stand by what you're saying. I don't think you can kind of go into it half-heartedly and be scared of how people are going to react, because at the end of the day, I mean, it has to be what you believe in.
And Amr, you had a question?
And it has, and I think...
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was saying that it has to be true to your own voice as well, you know? I know that, like, a couple of years ago, I did this play at Lincoln Center here in New York called Disgraced, which went on to win the Pulitzer and has been on Broadway now. But that play got a lot of reactions from South Asians and from within the Muslim community because of its, it was a very controversial depiction of a Muslim man. And, you know, but often in doing that play, and even with the playwright, there was this conversation that we would have about, you know, the responsibility of the artist as an artist in terms of like telling their truth versus trying to speak into some agenda that exists on a larger cultural level, and what is the friction between those two things, you know?
You told us about the HBO show that's upcoming, so we'll look out for that. I also heard there's something called the Halal Family. Is that in development right now?
Yes. So the Halal Family is actually a web series that I created. We have 4 episodes.
Yeah.
They are quote unquote it's a web series / PSA about anti-Muslim, addressing Muslim bigotry and hate crimes towards Muslims in America. And so we take on different issues, but it is done in the guise of the all-American sitcom Family, and it's a parody of sort of 80s sitcoms in the style of, Growing Pains or Family Ties or The Cosby Show and other things like that. So we play a family of Muslim Americans who are the most American Muslim family you could ever find, who don't want to be, and who are terrified of being thought of as anything else, and it's very funny. So that's going to be on the web actually in the next couple of months.
All right, okay, we'll look out for that. Aasif Mandvi, thank you so much for doing your very first interview about No Landsman. I believe that it was the first one. Thank you.
I should do more like this. This is great. Thank you.
We really enjoyed your time and having you here on the stream. Thank you very much. Thank you to all of the Hangout as well.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Malika.
I'll give the last word to It's Kakangi, who writes in for you saying, you're a great actor. I never knew you were a writer. I'm going to check your books out. Give me the title of the books. Of course, it's No Landsman.
Was that somebody from his family? Was that one of his aunties?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Yeah, we'll see. All right, thanks very much, everybody. So tomorrow I am off to the United Nations. So Malika will be sitting in this chair talking about what?
Shifting gears, we'll be talking about Haiti. 5 years after a catastrophic earthquake, really, has Haiti been rebuilt, or is it still struggling to emerge from the rubble? That's a question that we're going to ask on Thursday. We'll see you then.